Hello and welcome back to the Formula Next Gen podcast, where we take a look at and review the last weekend's single-seater junior series action. And now we're in the summer break from the main European racing season. We're also going to be having a look at some of the driver changes that are and that might be happening for 2024. So the first half of this podcast we'll be taking a look at the IndyNXT rounds at Nashville and at the Indy road course, and the second half will be a more rambling section where I opine for a bit about who I think deserves to move up, who I think deserves to stay in their current series, and what driver changes I expect to see. So we're going to start looking back to last week's round of the IndyNXT series in Nashville in the United States for the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix. I do love some of the names of the US races, a lot better than the Qatar Airways Rolex Aramco Made in Italy Grand Prix of Emilia Romagna, in my opinion. Anyway, so we had three drivers making their IndyNXT debut in Nashville, with Francesco Pizzi, who raced in Formula 3 last year. He was the UAE F4 champion 2020. In the same year, he came second in the Italian F4 Championship this season, which featured the likes of Gabriele Mini, Dino Beganovic and Gabriele Bortoleto, and many more. He's currently sixth in the USF Pro 2000, so he promised much quite a few years ago when he first moved from karts to cars, but I fear he didn't quite deliver on that promise, at least in the last two rounds of IndyNXT. He joined Able Motorsports alongside Yuvin Sundaramurthy, also from USF Pro 2000. He's currently 14th in this year's championships. He's been competing in that championship quite a few years now, with the best finished of third a few years ago. The third rookie joining the series is Victor Franzoni, Brazilian racer, raced in Europe in the early part of his car career. Before moving over to the States, he won the Pro Mazda, which is now USF Pro 2000, and he'll be joining Juan Carlos Hollinger racing team for Nashville and the Indy Grand Prix as well. Joining again this round was Matthew Brabham, who impressed greatly on his debut in the round before the short oval at Iowa. He finished in 4th. And going into the round at Nashville, Christian Rasmussen was leading the standings. Rookie Nolan Siegel was now 3rd after leading for a time. That was after a pretty disappointing run of form at Mid-Ohio in Iowa, finishing 15th both times. And that came right after back-to-back wins at Detroit and Road America, so it's gone quite downhill quite fast for Siegel. The race at Nashville got underway with Rasmussen, who qualified on pole, and Nolan Siegel behind. All very well behaved for the first few laps, with Hunter McElrea making a move on Nolan Siegel. He was then followed by Jacob Abel and the Briton Louis Foster, Siegel getting quite bogged down in the opening laps. Foster and Abel then went wheel to wheel over the bridge, came pretty close to contact, it looked like. Maybe there was contact, I'm not sure, but Foster got through. Matthew Brabham made a pretty late move on Kyffin Simpson, outbroke himself, nearly ended up in the tyres. He did a reverse out, basically ruining his race. Ended up in 13th. Christian Vogel ended his race in the wall, bringing out a full course caution, the first full course caution of the race. At this point, Rasmussen was leading with Hunter McElrea in 2nd, Louis Foster in 3rd. A short while later, after the restart, Ernie Francis Jr. made heavy contact with the wall and brought out the second full course caution. Same top three on the restart, Rasmussen from McElrea and Foster, and Jacob Abel behind, getting good traction out of one of the opening corners and getting past Louis Foster for 3rd place. Irishman James Rowe tried to make the move to get past Nolan Siegel, who is now down to 5th, which proved to be unsuccessful though. And at that same time, just behind them, Rasmus Lind tried to make a move on Daniel Frost, dived down the inside, but he was quite far alongside and I think deserved a bit more space than was given by Frost. It looked like Frost more or less just turned in on Lind, and it was Frost who ended up worse off, ending his race in the barriers, bringing out the 3rd full course caution. On the final restart of the race, Rasmussen got a good jump from the field and pulled a sizable gap in the opening few metres going into the first corner. Louis Foster ran straight on through the runoff, dropped back pretty far. Jacob Abel had to give back one position for blocking on the restart, so he gave a position back to Nolan Siegel, which he did, and then he immediately took that place back just one corner later, getting him back into 3rd place, which was where he finished. Christian Rasmussen took the win from pole position, and despite all the chaos behind, he led every lap of the 35-lap race. He was never really challenged. Hunter McElrea was 2nd, and Jacob Abel taking the final spot on the podium. Christian Rasmussen said after the race he got 100% from that, and he was very happy, and as well he might. now with a 45-point lead in the standings. It was onto the road course at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And at Indy, qualifying was on the condensed Friday, of course, all action happening on the Friday in the packed weekend with IndyCar and NASCAR. Hunter McElrea led an Andretti Autosport 1-2 with James Rowe in the second place on qualifying. Christian Rasmussen qualified all the way down in 9th, his worst qualifying result of the season so far. Nolan Siegel, the rookie who was of course leading at one stage, having another bad day in 7th. Kiko Porto qualified in 13th, his debut race of the season so far. He was the USF 2000 champion in 2021, currently second in the USF Pro 2000 season this year. McElrea said qualifying on pole felt like winning the championship, and qualifying had been the team's downfall this year, but obviously they did something right this weekend with Andretti getting the 1-2 on the grid. So the race got underway, the top drivers maintaining their grid positions, Rasmussen and Siegel obviously trying to make as much ground as they could as quickly as possible with their lowly qualifying positions. Victor Franzoni, who made his debut at Nashville, had an incident looked like some sort of suspension failure, which was a shame for him. He continued round the banking towards the final sequence of corners into the section which made up turn 1 on the Speedway oval. He was out of the way and the race could continue under green flag conditions. Louis Foster tried to make the move on his teammate McElrea on the back straight, didn't quite get through, and they were running pretty close with about 10 laps to go, and later on he tried to make another move, a dive down the inside of McElrea, which didn't go too well from him. There was contact between the two, the left front of Louis Foster and the rear right of McElrea, and that tells you all you need to know. Basically, it was front axle on rear axle. Foster wasn't really far enough alongside McElrea to get the corner. It was McElrea's corner, and Foster ended up limping back to the pits for a DNF. A shame for him, although he did take the fastest lap, so he was up there in the race. But it's just a shame he couldn't go on to finish. A rookie in this championship, of course, is Foster, and he's been on the podium a few times, been on pole a few times, got a win already in his rookie year, but he'll no doubt be looking to bounce back after a pretty bad weekend at the Illinois Oval in a couple of weeks. Foster and McElrea are of course teammates at Andretti Autosport along with James Rowe and Jamie Chadwick, and the one thing you must not do when you're racing is to crash into your teammate, and of course that's what Foster did. Teammates probably work differently in all categories of racing, but especially in the junior series when you are the customer for the team and not necessarily an employee. You are paying quite a lot of money on your own or from your sponsors, and it's never really in your interest to go for the team's championship or to help your teammates succeed, because you're both looking for the next step on the junior ladder in whatever tier, whatever category of racing you're in. So a very difficult situation for the team and for Foster, but not for McElrea, of course, who held on to a late race charge from James Rowe and took his first win of the season. His first win at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, with teammate James Rowe behind in second, so another 1-2 from the Andretti team, 1-2 in qualifying and the same 1-2 in the race. In the final lap of the race, Jamie Chadwick made a move on Nolan Siegel, who by this point was down to 9th. Didn't quite pay off. She ran wide onto the grass, lost another position to Kiko Porto, who took advantage of the scrap between the two. He ended up getting past Siegel as well to finish in 9th, not bad for the debutante. On the last lap, Chadwick did eventually get past Siegel and finished in 10th place. An impressive run of form for Jamie Chadwick recently, with 10th, 10th, 8th and 10th in the last 4 races respectively. She said in an interview with the race that she was too slow to adapt, but she was making progress, and that is clear to see from her results. And after the weekend in Indy, she is no longer last of the full-timers in the standings. She's jumped ahead of Christian Bogle and Jagger Jones. She's now 12th in the series and the 4th rookie overall, which isn't bad considering she's coming straight from Europe and the style of racing in the States is quite a lot different. No ovals, for example, is the most obvious difference, but I'm sure there are many, many others. Pretty much everyone else in this series has had some form of US racing experience in the lower categories, so I do expect good things from Chadwick moving forward into next year. Josh Pearson, pairing his sports car duties in the WEC and IMSA and the LMP2s with a part-time season in IndyNXT as well. Not doing too bad either. He finished 8th today. He said he was expecting more considering where he qualified, but is happy with a strong finish. He did have some front wing damage, he said, from the start, and it looks like he'll be staying on with HMD Motorsport for the next few races at least, hopefully finishing the season in IndyNXT. So on to the next race in 2 weeks' time at the Gateway Oval in Illinois, the last oval of the season. So at the minute, Christian Rasmussen continues to lead the standings, although his margin has been eaten away slightly with his 6th place finish at Indy and McElroy's pole fastest lap, most laps led and the win. All of those, of course, give points in IndyNXT, meaning a haul of 54 points, bringing him to just 33 points behind Rasmussen in the lead. So now on to the second part of the podcast, silly season, and there's been some chopping and changing already, of course, in both Formula 1 and in IndyCar. This weekend, Helio Castroneves announced he was stepping back from full-time racing. Contract sagas with Alex Palou, Chip Ganassi continuing as more rumours flying about too. I'll touch on some of those changes in the IndyCar season itself before moving on to what I think will happen in IndyNXT and the changes that might be expected there. So, of course, Alex Palou moving to McLaren was a rumour for a while, looked pretty likely until recently. He split with his Monaco-based management company this weekend, and a statement from Chip Ganassi, his current team, accused Aaron McLaren of playing the victim and that he remains under contract with Ganassi, so it looks like he'll be driving for Ganassi next year, which is, of course, good for them because it looks as if he's going to win. Another potential move on the cards was Marcus Ericsson. He was last year's Indy 500 winner, of course, second this year. Technically still a paid driver, bringing his Husky Chocolates money to the team. It does look like Chip Ganassi have made him a pay offer to keep the rather in-demand now Ericsson. He was supposedly lining up a move to Andretti, and I know a few other teams were also planning him to pay him money for his services. But I reckon he's going to remain with his current team at Chip Ganassi for the foreseeable. Tom Blomqvist, another driver on the market, or no longer on the market I should say, as he's just announced signing for Meyer Shank Racing in favour of Helio Castroneves, who I said earlier will be taking a step back from full-time racing. Tom Blomqvist, the son of rally driver Stig Blomqvist, made his IndyCar debut with Meyer Shank in Toronto, replacing, of course, Simon Pagenaud, who's still injured with a concussion from that nasty free practice incident a few weeks ago. Although it did end in retirement, he obviously showed enough promise to sign for the team for next year. Helio Castroneves, taking a step back from full-time racing, now a part owner of the team. He will be returning with Meyer Shank for the Indy 500 next year, and I hope in years going forward, as he tries to become the only driver to win 5 Indy 500s. Linus Lundqvist, the IndyNXT champion last year, who moved from Europe to the States, won multiple championships in Europe, including British F3, before winning the Formula Regional Americas, is currently he was third in his first attempt at Indy Lights before winning last year. He's been waiting patiently for a seat in IndyCar. He made a very good debut, qualifying in the top 12 at Nashville last week, but unfortunately ended his race with a crash. Nothing was confirmed for him yet, though. Although I reckon he could be lining up a move to replace Stingray Robb at Dalecoin Racing. Robb's rookie year hasn't been all that good. He's second last out of the full-timers with only Benjamin Peterson behind him at the minute. His future looked uncertain as well. Lundqvist won the IndyNXT for Dalecoin in Indy Lights as it was then last year, so his relationship with the team could see him moving there. Into the F1 silly season, and of course there's already been a few mid-season driver changes from who else but the Red Bull family and AlphaTauri. One of the key moves that might be taking place that I haven't heard much talk of so far, possibly because I'm reading a bit too much into it, but is Frederick Vesti to Williams, and here's why I reckon that might be on the cards. He's set to make his Formula 1 weekend debut, where he takes to the track in FP1 in the Mercedes in Mexico City. He's a Mercedes junior driver, of course, and the driver I suspect he will replace next year will be Logan Sargent, and that second Williams seat will sort of become that Mercedes-controlled seat as it was for Russell and Bottas before. His debut season is yet to produce any points, and I do wonder if he will be sought to be replaced with the close ties that Williams have to Mercedes. Of course, James Vowles, their ex-strategy director, now team principal of Williams. Although I don't see Vesti being that much more promising than Sargent was to begin with. Sargent seems to be liked by the team, although perhaps not so much by James Vowles. He was brought in as team principal at the beginning of this year from Mercedes, and Sargent had already been signed by the team when the team was under the control of Jost Capito in team principal. James Vowles always speaks very well of his drivers, but I do think there might be a switch for that seat. Zhou Guanyu, Alfa Romeo, in his second year currently. I reckon he will be staying. He's closed up to Bottas this season, almost on par with him. He's had a best qualifying of 5th in Hungary, of course. The driver who could replace him would be Théo Pourchaire. I don't think he'd be a particularly good fit. It's his 3rd season in Formula 2. He's currently winning that championship during the summer break, but I wouldn't expect anything less from a driver in their 3rd season. And despite all the money that Alfa Romeo have given him, I don't really see a switch being made there. He's in his 3rd season in the Alfa Romeo branded ART car. I think the season is almost basically fully funded by Alfa, so that's about 2 or 3 million invested in him. But Zhou is doing a very good job, and it's looking like the Alfa will be a tricky car once again next year. And if there's one thing that makes a tricky car slightly easier, it's drivers who know the team, know the characteristics of the car well. Both drivers have seen how the car has developed, and to be honest, how it's gotten worse compared to the other teams over the last year and a half. Started, of course, very close to the weight limit, underweight, so they could afford to place ballast strategically. But as other teams have closed up in the midfield battle, Alfa Romeo have dropped back considerably. And I don't really think taking Zhou out and putting Pourchaire in, we're going to help them in the short term or the long term, really. Zhou had a good qualifying in Hungary. He was 5th. Track obviously suited them in the car. Bottas qualified in 7th, and an electronic glitch on the start, of course, meant he didn't get away well at all. I heard that this was possibly due to Zhou holding the brake on the start, which ruined both of their races, because of course it hindered Bottas directly behind Zhou. But there is promise for Zhou and the team as a whole, I think. So more of the F1, all the rumours surrounding Perez, Leclerc to McLaren, Norris to Mercedes, Hamilton to Ferrari. None of that's going to happen in my view. They've all got contracts signed, or in Hamilton's case, about to be signed with their respective teams for next year, and I don't really see any change occurring there. Back to the Formula 2, Oliver Behrman, I did think would replace Kevin Magnussen at Haas, and that second seat would become a Ferrari-controlled seat, as it sort of was for Mick Schumacher, as Behrman is a Ferrari junior. Magnussen has been outperformed by Hülkenberg this season. Magnussen not scoring since Miami, Hülkenberg having definitely got better performance out of the car, especially during qualifying. Strong points finish on the sprint in Austria, finishing 6th. It's done nothing but affirm Hülkenberg's position with the team going forward, in my view. It does look like Magnussen will re-sign, as Günther Steiner is worried whether he might break the door on the way out of the team. Just kidding. I don't think Behrman is quite ready to have a go at F1 yet. I hope he gets an FP1 outing at some point this year or next, but I do reckon he'll be staying in F2 for another year. So on to the Formula 2 grid. And the full grid of the season for next year probably won't be decided for ages yet. The signing doesn't happen until much later. I do think the rookies, like Oliver Behrman, Enzo Fittipaldi, Zane Maloney, Arthur Leclerc, Isaac Hadjar, will all get second seasons, possibly with a move of teams. Maybe one of them might take the Prema, the very fancied Prema seat that Vesti might vacate, only of course if he moves up or out from or of Formula 2. I would like to see Behrman's consistency improve overall. He can put masterful laps together. Think of his Baku qualifying with a damaged car, pole, sprint race, feature race win, with just a handful of rounds into his rookie year. But his racecraft not really his racecraft, but his strategy in Spa didn't fare too well for him, with some pretty poor finishes recently. Maybe due to his inconsistencies in his racing and his understanding of the strategies required. I would like Leclerc to move up to the Prema team in place of Vesti. Of course, the two Prema drivers would then both be Ferrari juniors battling out for next year's to be the next Ferrari Junior to move up to F1, but I don't see Arthur Leclerc's stock being as high as his older brother's was. We saw Jehan Daruvala take part in the rookie free practice at the Rome round of the Formula E this season, as well as last year's champion Felipe Drugovich. Daruvala was dropped by the Red Bull programme last year, and that's the point at which Formula 1 dreams end, and Formula E looks the way to go to spend a perfectly respectable career, continuing in motorsport obviously. In Rome, he drove for the Mahindra racing team. The Banbury-based Formula E team racing under the Indian licence would certainly not pass on the opportunity to sign one of India's best drivers. The team competed in every season of Formula E and fielded Karun Chandok in the first season, and it would be great to see Daruvala drive next year for the team in Formula E. The other Indian driver who's doing pretty well is Kush Maini. He's just ahead of Daruvala in the standings. He finished 14th last year in Formula 3, made the jump up to F2 after just one season. Had a very good start. He's currently 11th in the standings, on the podium for the sprint race in Melbourne, although his form has dropped off in recent races, with a few out of the points finishes and some DNFs. I do reckon he will get a second chance in F3, possibly remaining with Campos. Felipe Drugovich doesn't have a drive either this year. He joined the Aston Martin programme. He got some running in the testing for the F1 when Lance Stroll was out due to injury, but so far has not driven this year apart from in the rookie test in the Formula E. And with Alonso doing well at Aston Martin and Stroll certainly not going anywhere anytime soon, it does look like the best chance for Drugovich to get behind the wheel of a car soon is to take a chance in Formula E. And it looks like there has been interest from Avalanche Andretti, Avalanche Andretti. And that would be a pretty good move by Andretti to sign him up to partner the current FE champion Jake Dennis. Into Formula 3, moves are of course announced quite late before the start of the next season, often January or February time before we get an idea of the lineup. Just one round to go in the championship this year, Monza, after the summer break. Gabriel Bortoleto looks certain to take the championship at his first attempt, and with it a move up to Formula 2. Some of the names that have won Formula 3 in their first attempt, of course, include Oscar Piastri in the Championships GP3 guys, including George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Esteban Ocon, and look where all those people are now. Robert Schwartzman also won at his first attempt, but his career deserves a closer look at because he's surely one of the outliers in that. Surely a lost talent from the feeder series paddock and probably from F1 as a whole. I do expect Bortoleto to move up to a good team in F2 next year and do pretty well there. There have also been rumours of a shake-up in the Red Bull Junior programme, some drivers possibly getting dropped. I reckon that Montoya might find himself part of that. His career in single-seaters might come to an end now. He's had pretty bad luck this season, and although he's got quite a lot of money behind him from Colombia, and certainly from his father, Juan Pablo Montoya, of course, they've also got their own racing thing together in the European Le Mans series with Henrik Hedman. It does look like Sebastian Montoya's single-seater dream might be over if he ends up getting dropped from Red Bull. I reckon the whole reason for this is because they don't really have any faith in their junior programme anymore. Daniel Ricciardo being chosen in favour of Iwasa or Liam Lawson surely shows there's a lack of confidence in the junior team, and they may be looking at changes to make lower down in the ranks. And as I say, Montoya might be on that list of changes, possibly Hadjar as well. He's had a few bad races recently. Another driver in F3 who's been talked about a little bit is Johnny Edgar. It's his third season this year and it hasn't gone particularly well. He's currently 16th in the standings, no wins, no podium so far this season at all, or indeed in F3 in his last 3 attempts. He's pretty disappointed, he said. He has not stood on the podium since the ADAC Formula 4 series in 2020, the season that he won. He spoke to Formula Scout and said that he's eyeing a move away from single-seaters, possibly to sports cars, which is not a bad move. There's the new GT3, the GT3E as they call it, class coming to WEC. There's always going to be a pro drive growing in ELMS, ALMS, or even IMSA, so he'll have a career in motorsport, which is, the dream of many. He's driven single-seaters for a while, given it a good go. He won the championship in ADAC F4, the 2017 European Karting Championship as well, so he'll have a good future, a good career in something else, I'm sure. So that just about does it for this episode. Coming up next week, there'll be a review of every driver in F2 and F3, just me jumping on the bandwagon of the mid-season score report style videos and podcasts coming out from everyone. Where I'm going to try and give each driver a grade, something they've done well and something they could work on for the remainder of the season or for next year. So stay tuned for the next episode of the Formula Next Gen podcast.